introduce Charley Castex to living well. He's guided tens of thousands across 6 continents, pairing his intuitive gift with his passion for empowering others to realize their spiritual potential. Charley's got a new book, Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, Strategies for Syncing Spirit, Mind, and Body, which has just been released by Only Love Press. Charley is an Asheville local where he's consistently voted best psychic in Asheville, North Carolina for a decade by the Mountain Express Readers Poll. And Charley, welcome to Living Well.
Thank you, Bob. My pleasure to be here with you. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Why don't you share with folks a little bit about your history and kind of how you kind of came to do this work?
Sure. Well, I was blessed to be born with a passion for all things spiritual and as a natural proclivity for interest in spirituality and by extension psychic phenomenon. As an infant, curiously enough, I remember having a full awareness of insights and some perspectives, for instance, about my parents' marital troubles and that kind of thing. And I was just basically gravitationally pulled towards that which seemed to have meaning and inspiration. And particularly as a young boy, I was an altar boy and was very drawn to the mysticism that is inherent within religion and certainly within Catholicism. And as an altar boy, I started enacting masses in my room and that kind of thing. So a bit unusual, but I was always been interested in divinity and interested in our perceptions beyond the physical.
And it led you to meeting a medicine man, an author, Sun Bear.
That's correct.
Pretty early on in your life.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah, I was very, very fortunate to be taken under Sun Bear's wing and enjoyed a 4-year apprenticeship with him when I was 18 and almost 19. So that was quite an experience across the board, and it was initiated. A lot of people are curious about how that came to be, and my eldest sister had read Sun Bear's autobiography, which is called The Path of Power, and in the back there was a message for people who are interested in a screening program that they could come out and stay with the tribe for about 10 days. And if there was mutual respect and interest, and then there was the potential of being able to apprentice with Sun Bear and the Bear Tribe. And she had explored that possibility, and I found it just endlessly intriguing. So I followed my big sister's cue, and my life changed from there on.
Well, yeah, now you have this blend of growing up Catholic and then coming across this, an indigenous
that's correct.
beliefs, as, and this blending of how that kind of shaped who you were.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then also the metaphysical component, when I was quite young, kind of preteen, my eldest sister was a great inspiration for me. She had basically opened the door to all kinds of metaphysical interests, from the tarot and tarot cards and that whole mystical perspective, as well as some channeled material, a channel named Hilarion, who is the author named Maurice B. Cook out of Canada. And so I was drawn to a lot of different inspiration, including Zen teachings, the teachings of Ram Dass, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of those teachings came across for me in my teen years, and I was just like a bee to a flower.
A spiritual sponge.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just find it endlessly fascinating, that human potential and empowerment and being connected to the infinite.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of so much at the core of your new book, Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, Strategies for Syncing Spirit, Mind, and Body. Tell us a little bit about kind of the evolution of creating this book for 2021.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, first off, ESB, as I refer to it, Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, is essentially a series of 14 empowering strategies that sync the mind and the body with the spirit. And I came to approach this project from necessity after seeing that so many people are drawn towards wellness, as you know, Dr. Bob.
Yeah.
And thankfully these days there's a real hunger for empowerment. And I found that many of the people that I were guiding, they were intrigued and excited about the possibility of having more spiritual connection and more empowerment and more lucidity and more clarity in their lives, but they didn't quite know how to get there. So I had given that some thought, and I had been teaching for about 25 years now in different programs that were based in the teachings around some of these strategies. So I decided to flesh them out and have it in a format where people could have a takeaway. And they could connect, for instance, with a concept like metacognition and being aware of our own thoughts as a place to start, as a launching point, and developing an ability to have a compassion reflex, for instance, or have the wherewithal to understand what spiritual fitness means. So these concepts came together really out of necessity of wanting people to have a takeaway that they could approach themselves and investigate and be more participatory with their own health and wellness. So the idea was for them to be proactive with their own spiritual path, and that was the effort behind the book.
Well, I had an opportunity to read most of the book on my vacation in the Outer Banks, and it was kind of one of the books I got to bring along and take in, and it was so it was a time already that's kind of naturally reflective for me, and it was really, really awesome to kind of try some of these things out, and
great,
and get a feel for them, and the first chapter really kind of set the tone for me about, I think it's called Minding the Store.
Exactly.
This idea of really staying connected to kind of what the inner dialogue is and the conditioning is, right? And how to kind of set the conversation to the one we want.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's wonderful to hear that you were connecting with the concept and with the strategy.
Oh yeah, I mean it's I think we I think a lot of us we just kind of take that inner voice for granted. And it's so easy to believe because it's so familiar.
Right.
And but oftentimes, that voice isn't really working in our best interest. And it's, you forget that, hey, I can change the channel,
right.
If I want.
Right.
And I think in your book, you kind of even push a little farther, like to set the bar at bliss, so to speak. Or at least opening up to new possibilities, right?
Right, absolutely. I think it's great to shoot high in that regard. We might as well be as ecstatic and as joyful as we can be. I mean, that's the real opportunity here. And as they say, you shoot for the moon, but if you lasso a star, that's fine.
And I don't think, kind of in our normal kind of lives, that we always are aware of, kind of what we're living for in the day, and what it is that, like this bliss that you talk about in the book is one, it's Charley, it's really well written.
Well, thank you. That's a great compliment.
My other companion on the book, on my beach trip was Tom Robbins. Even the Cowgirls Get the Blues. I actually started reading it last June when I was in the Outer Banks, and I never finished it. And your book kind of reads a bit like Tom Robbins. There's a poetry to it, and
thank you.
Much like kind of in this bigger self. It's not trying to pin anything down, but it's really trying to open and loosen you up. To be a little freer.
Right.
Right. At the moment.
Right. And I was very inspired to introduce a pretty strong quotient of humor into Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, which I think is
Yeah.
a little bit too unexpected or unfamiliar in the spiritual genre.
Right.
So it was really a wonderful opportunity to do that, and I'm glad it's being so well received, that people are enjoying the humor, because as it's been said, I think the cosmic is largely comic, and it's a matter of recognizing that spirituality and humor are not mutually exclusive. They're absolutely interrelated, strongly, because that
Yeah, well,
instinct for
supposed to be
laughter
about,
is innate.
yeah.
Nobody needs to teach us how to laugh, and nobody needs to teach us how to be joyful when we come in. So it's really our primary operating system is biased towards happiness and laughter.
Yeah, and I think our conditioning can sometimes kind of suppress that, kind of push it down, and we have to kind of, as you say, empower ourselves to reclaim it.
Right.
And that
Right.
one of the things that I took from the book was, even our difficult moments, even when we're struggling and feeling challenged by life, even when we're kind of in the midst of pain, there's still a sacredness, there's still a divinity to the moment, there's still, even joy, that I'm going through these growing pains can be within reach, for spiritual seekers.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All of it, right?
Yeah. That's a great a great extraction from the material. If you're able to realize that insight, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I'd love for you to talk more about the compassion reflex, which is another chapter of the book that really talks about, at the core of this is cultivating compassion.
Right. Absolutely. Well, sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, I look at compassion as being another innate operating system, and I drew some distinctions between, for instance, in that chapter of the compassion reflex, between the rescuer and the helper, between understanding that also that compassion is not pity. Okay, so compassion is the sense of connection and the sense of unicity, if you will, of being transparent with each other, that there really is no separation, and even though we have individuality, the sense of feeling for each other, and especially being compassionate towards ourselves, is really vital. It's absolutely vital. So the idea is that we can basically trade our knee-jerk reactions for the choice to center into compassion. And instead of reacting, when illusion gets us by the short hairs, we can apply a firm compassion pressure, basically, is the idea here. So it's a reflex that we want to be able to develop, versus having the default reflex to judgment, to punitive judgment, to harsh criticism, which I talk about as the negative narrative. So compassion is really vital, because I think it's like a kind of consciousness assemblage point, if you will, that links us back to our humanity, to our very selves. So when we're being compassionate, we feel inclusive rather than exclusive. So the compassion reflex is about indulging that instinct willfully, consciously, and joyfully.
And it seems true that the ability to have compassion for others is really intricately linked to being able to do it for yourself. It would be hard to do it for others if you couldn't do it for yourself.
Absolutely. And in fact, that harkens back to, actually a little farther in Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, Strategy 7, which is the practicing sacred selfishness. So the idea of sacred selfishness is about making sure that our cup is full before we try to extend a sip to somebody else. And these concepts are, in some ways, very natural, very organic, and and familiar, especially in terms of sacred selfishness. It's in some ways parallels the old airline spiel about making sure that you put your own air mask on and your safety mask before you give it to your, help your neighbor with theirs. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that it's often lost on people that championing the self and fleshing out our potential is not something that is done in a vacuum. As soon as we're more empowered, more joyful, more balanced, more hopeful, more inspired, then naturally there's a charge that extends to people, and you start to notice that effect on the environment with people around you. So it's one of the greatest things I think we can do for the world is to present one more empowered, healthy person into the mix.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're listening to Living Well right here on Asheville FM, and my guest today is psychic and spiritual guide and Asheville local, Charley Castex. And Charley, I need to take a short break and do a couple station announcements, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Yeah, so you're listening to Asheville FM at 103.3 FM and streamed at ashevillefm.org. The POP Project is an Asheville-based nonprofit working to spread the power of literacy through a greater access to books. By making books available to everyone, the POP Project enables people to lead better informed, more successful, and fulfilled lives. For more information on how to get involved, you can visit their website at www.thepopproject.org. Well, my guest today is Charley Castex. He has consistently been voted the top psychic right here in Asheville for the past decade, and he has written a new book that named Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, Strategies for Syncing Spirit, Mind, and Body, just released by Only Love Press. And Charley, one of my favorite chapters of the book on the chapter on breath. One, I thought it was really well written.
Thank you.
And very creative and engaging. But, just is the simple act of consciously taking a deep breath changes everything. And we don't do it. It was really kind of, I had to remember to do it.
Yeah, isn't that ironic?
It's missing from my life, conscious deep breathing.
Sure.
And the effect it has on our being.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's really disarming. And as I joked about a bit in that chapter, it's like, imagine breathing is actually good for you. So we tend to do it so unconsciously, but if we're able to introduce consciousness into the equation, then I believe we're starting to transition into more of the realm that the mystics and the yogis have been speaking about for quite literally thousands of years, which is inside the breath. There is an experience of connecting with life that granted is for most of us ineffable and abstract. It's an abstraction. It's like, well, what am I supposed to experience? Well, it's based in feeling. You don't have to know what it is before you experience it. It's not so much a psychological process as it is an existential experience. So I love hearing that you enjoyed the Become Inspired by Breath chapter. Done my best to introduce a few different strategies in there. And
I tried one, the four, take a deep breath on a count of 4,
right,
hold for 7, and release for 8. And I did it for about 10 minutes, which might be a little bit on the long side, but I do some work in meditation, so I'm a little comfortable with a little bit longer time. And, its ability to bring you into the present moment. And of course, I'm doing this sitting on a balcony overlooking the ocean off in the distance.
Right.
Which is, wonderful, inspiring scenery. But it just allowed me to just be more in the moment. And it was kind of, it was a really good feeling.
Fantastic. That's great. And you may notice if you double up on it, we have it a couple of times a day, then it has this really nice cumulative effect, because we're oxygenating the brain when we breathe deeply like that, and particularly with these systematic holds that are involved. And we're also activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is considered our rest and digest system, which is often a bit unplugged from our system, or we're kind of detached from it because we're usually running in a very high sympathetic nervous system state of high alert and stress response and all of that. So that's great to hear, Bob, because it's perfect counterbalance is to drop into the breath in terms of syncing the mind, body, and spirit. I think that's the central access point is through the body and breath.
Well, just to even, take a moment, where I might be driving and I'm at a stoplight, or, walking into a store, or somewhere, where I just kind of have a moment on my hand, and I could probably check my phone if I wanted.
Sure.
How the conditioning works now, or I could take a couple deep breaths, and just, kind of consciously relax.
Right.
So it was, and that's always, it's kind of, it's so simple, yet it's kind of profound, and, that's always available.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's it right there. It is very profound in its effect, because then when you go back to checking the phone or dealing with responsibilities and obligations, you find this clarity that's just phenomenal. Yeah, it's really in that sense of being able to not just seek your center, but to find it. I mean, it's really quite a revelation for people.
And to feel it, right?
Exactly. That's what I mean by finding it. Exactly, to feel it. Yeah, because in feeling it, then it's, speaking of all the thought and what I like to term being top-heavy, where we're always so excessively cerebral and analytical about everything. I love that. I think it's great, and we're designed to be great thinkers with these powerful forebrains that we have. But it just begs the question that you want to be there to, you want to have a sense of experiencing the total self, and we're not just thinking machines. So when we have that clarity and that sense of really seeding into our interiority, into our inner self, through breath, through these different strategies that center us, then you go back to thinking with maximum clarity, and there's actually hemispheric synchronization that occurs in the brain, and a real upregulation of all the neural activity. So it's amazing how if we take a moment to be more experiential and to feel deeper, that we actually think with greater lucidity too. So it brings what's called brain coherence into the picture.
Yeah. Well, I just found, and I see this thread with so many different schools of spiritual thought, and of being in the present moment, of awareness, as you say,
right.
And to be there and to be looking forward, and not to be beholden to our past, or is part of the coming alive,
right?
And being part of the whole that I think can bring a sense of peace and joy in our lives. And connectedness.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Charlie, what was one of your favorite chapters, or, kind of one of the chapters for you that really seemed to touch a chord for you, that kind of surprised you a bit, how it ended up expressing itself?
That's a great question. Well, I think there's a few of them in place that are there. I think that the Becoming Visionary chapters was particularly enjoyable. I think that may be one of the ones that I really found very satisfying to jump into, because it's a big subject. I mean, becoming visionary is such a grandiose implication there. And like I said, it usually the idea of becoming visionary conjures up all sorts of personalities like Nostradamus and the Wright brothers, and like I said in the book, maybe even Miles Davis. But the truth is,
big spiritual hitters there, right?
Yeah, right. But we all have that potential to be able to perceive and receive more information in life intuitively.
Yeah.
So the idea is preparing the vessel for it to be seaworthy in terms of, again, the coherence in the heart and the brain, and getting ourselves prepped to become more visionary. So I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed having some references to the experiences, for instance, that I was blessed to have with my Native American teachers. Sparrow Eagle, who was a Lakota holy man, he was the other Indian teacher that I was blessed to be under his wing as well for a 6-year apprenticeship. And in Becoming Visionary, I talk about the greater theme of, for instance, the vision quest in the Indian or indigenous mythologies of going up on the hill or into the vision pit. So it was enjoyable to be able to speak to some of my spiritual roots, as you were suggesting in the beginning of our program today. It was really nice to touch on such an ancient theme that, in a contemporary sense, can be re-experienced for people, and maybe not in the literal ceremonial sense, but just even in terms of somebody seeking their message, seeking their mission in life, seeking their purpose through retreating from the world or from all that sensory information and diving deep into their interior.
Well, we certainly live in a well-suited place for a vision quest of sorts, in these beautiful mountains. And the opportunity to backpack and kind of get lost in the woods, so to speak.
Right.
In fact, it's a great place to do it.
It really is, and the environment is so conducive to homeostasis and balance, and absolutely, it's a beautiful element.
Yeah, and I think some people, there's the go out there by yourself and kind of take on or be with the elements, and but you can also go out with a few folks and kind of have your own separate isolated camps, but you might be within shouting distance if somebody really needed help.
Sure.
And but yeah, you could still have your own experience where, like you say, you're trying to kind of set the vision for what's really going to make your life feel happy and fulfilled. How do you help people understand how to kind of wrap their brain around creating a vision for themselves? What's helpful in that process?
Okay, sure. Again, it's a really juicy subject. There's so many different angles I could approach it from. One of the best ways, I think, to start is to ask yourself what you're interested in and what you're passionate about. Because even though it for a lot of people it's very obvious, and then for a greater fraction as well, there are folks that it isn't as obvious. So if we're able to zero in on what we're interested in, I believe that interest can ignite into a passion, and that starts to supply meaning in people's lives, because that's often what's missing. Is there's just kind of like people running really fast in any direction is not necessarily getting them any closer to a sense of fulfillment. So as far as being able to touch into their sense of vision, their sense of purpose, I strongly encourage people to take some time. Often that's the biggest challenge, is taking just some time to internalize your focus or quiet. And we use the terms like meditation. And of course, it's a word that carries a lot of freight. It can mean a lot of different things, but essentially quieting allows us to be in touch with what is, rather than what we're always imagining or what we're referencing from the past or anticipating towards the future. I often these days, as a practical takeaway for our listeners, I recommend writing what I call a letter to the universe. And it's a fun exercise. It's very profound. And it works in this fashion. So the first step with it is you write down what you want. And it can be material things, it can be experiences, but you're articulating and expressing and clarifying for yourself what you really want out of the ball game of life. If you write down, and preferably on pad and paper, old school paper rather than a digital format, write down what you're wanting. And then the second aspect is you write down everything you're grateful for, even if it's just the warm cup of coffee or the 5-minute break at the job. But getting in touch with gratitude starts to elevate the emotions, and it invigorates the entire system. It's a phenomenal aspect of our human existence, is we can feel intense gratitude, and it has a tremendous therapeutic effect on the system across the board, body, mind, and spirit. So you write down what you're grateful for. And then the third aspect is you write down who you wish to become. And just think of it as like you just landed on planet Earth, or you were just given a second chance to live, another chance to kick the can. Like, well, who would you be? What would you do? And that's really profound, because you're not handing it over to Dr. Bob, Hannah, or Charley Castex and saying, hey, figure this out for me. You're saying to yourself, oh, okay, let me be proactive about that. What do I really want? So that's a check that can only be signed by the individual, right? And so it's very, it's like you're in the hot seat, and it's not something that you should do or have to do either. I think that's an important point. Yeah. It's like there's many approaches here, but shifting out of a lens of obligation and responsibility to figure yourself out is a good idea, because often people feel like, oh, I'm so far behind, I don't know where to begin. Well, just back off the judgments and look through the lens of opportunity and potential, and say to yourself, okay, I have a real potential here to be the captain of my own destiny. So if you actually write those three aspects out, either in one page or several pages, I recommend having it by your bedside stand, that is, or night table, and just reading it first thing in the morning when you wake up, and reading it before you fall asleep at the strategic points where the subconscious and the conscious mind are most available to each other and most interconnected at that point of the day. And that has a powerful effect of really sinking this into the operating system. And if you're really busy and you can't read it through, you got to race to catch the bus or something, well, then at least scan it. And so after reading that letter to the universe first thing in the morning, when you're going to sleep, before you fall asleep, after about 3 or 4 weeks, I recommend having a burning bowl ceremony where you consciously and unconsciously intend to transform all of that intentionality, all of that expression, as a kind of prayer offering, where you are determined to invest a deeper degree of devotion and dedication to your potential.
I like that.
So that's one very strategic way to do it. Great.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, because part of it is really having to build that motivation. You know,
absolutely,
to begin to allow yourself to live your life differently,
right?
You know, and in kind of in appreciation for this vision of who you'd like to be,
right?
Yeah,
right. And then you're forward looking, which is so important, because it's, you know, as we all know as people, it's just so compelling to rummage around and try to recycle the past all the time. And the way I look at it, Dr. Bob, is it is a point of reference for interest in terms of empowering people, is that I suggest that it's fine to look back, but just don't stare. So the rearview mirror is helpful, but you don't want to drive forward looking in your rearview mirror indefinitely. And that's the point of this empowerment aspect here, is you can reference the past and also the future, but being forward focused is super helpful. Just doing that, just looking forward to, wait a minute, I have a day, and the past really doesn't have a claim on us. It's mostly between our ears where we feel like, oh, there's this accountability to the past, but it only exists conceptually. So we're much more free than we realize, but the recognition of that freedom comes from being able to quiet enough and open our awareness and really feel the profound nature of existence.
Well, Charley, your book is Expand Your Spiritual Bandwidth, Strategies for Syncing Spirit, Mind, and Body. That's just released by Only Love Press. And it's a wonderful book, Charley. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I really recommend it. I think it's got something in there for everyone. So
thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Charley, for coming on Living Well and
my pleasure.
Sharing. Yeah.
My pleasure, Dr. Bob. Thank you for having me. It's a wonderful time to share this with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.